Hello, and welcome everyone to our Vistatec Life Sciences in Focus podcast, fascinating conversations with global life sciences experts. This is a space where we interview life sciences experts once a month, and I'm your host, Karen Tkaczyk. And we're mixing things up this month as Vistatec's Chief Marketing Officer, Simon Hodgkins, and I are going to discuss AI in life sciences, a topic that we get asked about here at Vistatec all the time, and that Simon has quite some expertise in. So I'll answer some of the questions this month, as well as asking them, perhaps. So Simon, please introduce yourselves to for our listeners, and do you want to set the scene on AI and life sciences? What's your viewpoint? Where do you think we are right now?
Well, Karen, it is a pleasure to be actually here. I feel like a guest slot has opened up on the Vistatec Life Sciences in Focus podcast. It's great. Love the work that you're doing here, and AI in life sciences, in healthcare, in med tech, in patient care. It's on everybody's agenda. It's a hot topic. I'm going to start maybe by saying I think it's got a heck of a lot going for it. It's making some phenomenal progress. But I'm also going to caveat that with saying there are some challenges here, there are some regulatory issues here, and there's some also areas that we need to think a little bit longer and harder about. And I hope we can bring that over today as we start to get into these things. And I'm thinking initially around AI services. This is not an advert, but Vistatec AI has been working a lot with everything from, prompt engineering, LLM management, workflow engineering, changing the way you work as a company, bringing in consultancy type services. So we've really invested a lot in this area. So obviously we're doing a lot. We're working with a lot of companies in this area. But I think ultimately I'd bring it back to Karen, the first thing, which is, there are challenges for companies still. And I don't, I don't say that lightly. When you're entering a new international market, for example, in the life sciences or in the healthcare space, there are still challenges. There are still regulations, and it's not a one size fits all scenario. It's different whether you just take the basics like Europe or Asia or the US, or, they're not the same. You take different states, you take different legalities, and then you take all the different companies that make up the wider life sciences industry. It gets quite complex quite quickly, and AI does help, but there's also another side to that discussion. So I'd maybe start there if I can. But you must see
Yeah.
big challenges too, Karen, right?
Oh, we do. So we see everything on the whole spectrum. I don't even know where to start. Which can of worms do we open first? So it's almost always within the first two questions anyone ever asks me. I usually get asked about my accent. That's usually that would I'd have to say, where are you from? Is often number one, but how is AI affecting your business is often number two these days, right? So uh, we're talking about regulated life sciences, right? We are late adopters. We are risk averse, right? We compliance is matters, and we're talking about patient safety, of course, right? So it's risk to life and limb. Obviously, that has driven compliance, but you can look at it either side of that coin. So I would say, I- of course, we have everybody wants to know whether translation or software localization, the services that we provide are good use cases for AI implementation, right? Most people we know we work with are feeling top-down pressure from their C-suite to reduce budget or to implement AI in some way. So I think a lot of people right now, if you're familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, they're off that peak of inflated expectations and they're right in the trough of disillusionment because in life sciences, people have worked out that AI can produce content in other languages and it's not compliant and it's not going to come with a translation certificate that can be submitted to a regulatory body. And they're sitting right in that trough of disillusionment and saying, so what can we do, Karen? So that's my sort of in a nutshell
Mm.
where we are.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a question we get asked all the time, right? Because
Yeah.
everybody, if I could, I'd say that everybody is reading headlines. So it's a headline-driven discussion where,
Hmm.
AI is solving everything overnight rapidly, and oh, there's more tools coming out, there's more LLMs, the model we're using has changed. But when it hits a regulated industry, there are lots of other areas to consider. And I'm thinking about, whether I use the word augmentation a lot. It augments the work that people are doing. So we are seeing whether it's clinicians or scientists or doctors or professors or regulatory teams, they can use AI for some of that heavy repetitive stuff or analysis type work, even predictions and patterns detection. We're seeing tremendous steps forward there. But when it comes to content consistency, quality, brand, tone, the human aspects of things, and that all important what must we do from a regulatory perspective, it's a little different, isn't it?
It's very different. It really is very different. And I usually give examples along. I mean, well, everybody knows that they can put something in Google Translate or in ChatGPT and they'll get the gist of something, right? People are used to doing that, which is why they think of it as a use case. But then as soon as when you're actually talking to somebody who's in, got a label for a medical device that they need to submit to a new global regulatory body or um, they're opening up a clinical trial in a new country, in a new locale, and they need the protocol and the informed consent form and the patient recruitment materials all ready to land to bring to engage patients and bring them into that trial. Um, uh, these people know that the content, they know how long it took them to create the content in English. And they know in their hearts that a machine can't just produce content of the same quality. They know that. But still there's top-down pressure and people are looking at workflows and where can we use it? What can we do? So my first sort of split point, if you like, for our potential clients and existing clients is this content that you're talking about regulated? Do you need a certificate of translation? Is it for a regulatory submission? Let's not start with all of that. Let's start with here some marketing copy. Not that we don't want brand to land, Mr. CMO. Of course, we care about our marketing copy. We know what it takes to engage people, but it's not regulatory. It's not regulated. Or let's even think even lower, even smaller, a chatbot on a corporate website, right? Or the corporate landing page, right? There's content that's less important, not mission critical, and there's content that's mission critical, that's regulatory, that's going to be submitted, going to, if it's all bad, if it's wrong, they'll get RFIs, the famous RFIs, requests for information from the regulatory bodies. They don't want requests for information from the regulatory bodies saying that this informed consent form is written in US English, and our British English reading patients are not going to understand this reference to this kind of hospital system or this insurance, this, that, or the other. I just gave you an example that's English, let alone any other language, right? So that's
Yeah.
we're back to the foundations of localization at that point, and AI isn't ready to do that cultural
Right.
nuance piece. We know
And
that, right?
yeah, and I think as you're talking, it's like we all see stories, don't we, where you might have a radiologist, for example, who's using AI to flag suspicious areas on a scan,
Hmm.
right? But it still needs a human to make that final
It
diagnosis,
does.
right?
Yep.
Or a
Yep.
researcher would be something else that springs to mind where they use AI to identify, I don't know, potential drug targets, for example, but they still need
Yep.
validation. They still need to go
Of
through
course they do.
trials process. They still need experimentation. They still need to prove themselves. And it's no different to what you're saying. A localization expert ultimately reviews and approves a lot of the AI generated translations
Mhm.
because otherwise you'll find yourself in a bit of a bind pretty quickly. And also, you mentioned clinical trials. Data privacy raises its head here too, doesn't it? So,
Mhm.
data privacy, there are security concerns.
Yeah.
These are major concerns for healthcare. So, what
Yep.
what do you think, Karen, too, about things like all the different tools that people have access to. You've got sensitive medical patient data here related
Yeah,
to all this across
yeah, like
not just in one area. I mean, across different
yeah.
geographies
Well,
and jurisdictions.
PII, is that what it's
Yeah,
called? Personal
yeah,
identifying
yeah.
information, right? Which could be for a legal context or banking or you name it, any of that information. Of course, anybody who is considering using these tools first needs to be in a closed system, right? Something that your cybersecurity team is not going to get upset about, right? You have to start with that. Um, because yeah, but I think people know that. Well, they forget, perhaps they forget, but I think most people in life sciences are very familiar with the protecting patient data situation from the days of GDPR and HIPAA. I think that these, although those regulations relate only to the US and to the European Union, the broadly that sense of needing to protect data, personal data, is well understood these days, and nobody's going to deliberately do something that is going to risk that. So people have to have their own models, their own LLMs, closed off systems, and that it becomes, and they forget that AI is not free, right? Sometimes people think AI is free. AI, there's a reason we hear about data centers in the news all the time. There's a reason we hear about electricity companies booming, right? This comes at a cost. So I have found that only some of our larger clients are seriously considering making the investments required to look at whether large learning models, even small learning models, are can be trained effectively to do this work. Most of our clients, most of the people I talk to, are still using neural machine translation and translation memories in what we in the localization industry would call a traditional workflow. Life sciences is not the place where people are making that leap. That tech and retail and other domains, media will come first. They'll get there first, and life sciences may follow one day. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I agree. I think the data side of things to me is fascinating because on one side you have the data privacy that you're describing. You have people using their own LLM models. Um, AI is really good at going through data at scale and matching, say, potential patients to potential trials.
Mm-hmm.
It's a multiplier, isn't it? It can help
Mm-hmm.
tremendously. And sometimes it can remove some of those bottlenecks in more traditional workflows for trials. But there's a bit before you get to the solution, which is you need to control the model. You need to make sure it's safe and secure. You need to have the data privacy piece built in initially. And that's no different, in the radiology example I was using earlier, it's a second reader type approach, you still
Yeah,
need expertise in
yeah,
the equation in the medical setting.
yeah.
It's no different as far as I think
Right.
I look at it from a localization perspective. You still need, at this moment in time, I mean, ask me the question in 10 or 20 years, I might have a different answer. But right now, I think it
We'll
is
be
so
long retired,
it's
Simon.
it is
Long
so it's
retired.
so important.
Yeah, that
We're not a
SME.
true AGI yet, right? We're still talking about
Right.
generative AI, and people
Yeah.
think they're sort of magic. They're just prediction machines. They're using data and they're just predicting the next answer, but they are good at analyzing data too. And so I think when it comes to reducing time, effort, which is always a challenge in most of the healthcare scenarios I've ever come up against, time and
Mm-hmm.
energy. It's a huge area.
Mm-hmm.
And we're heavily staffed with humans, thank goodness. And a lot of medical facilities struggle to even attract the
That's
talent
true.
that they need. So I think where AI can assist, and also deliver that augmentation, that assistance to a life sciences professional. I'm all for that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm a big proponent of
Mm-hmm.
it. But there are also edge cases, aren't there? There are also different ambiguous clinical scenarios that need to be
Yeah.
taken into account. And maintaining a strict and rigorous approach to the outputs and the validation, and also the audits that are required there and expected by regulators. particularly in certain types of content, for example. We talk a lot in the AI world about high risk data, high risk content.
Of course.
The legalities around that,
Yeah.
particularly with the European AI Act, is that you must
Yep.
have. It's not a discussion whether
Yep.
you can have experts in the loop. So you might have the finest AI solution on the planet at your
Hmm.
disposal and pots of money to provide that and the best data security in the world. But the regulations and the legalities are you must have humans in the loop in that
Yes.
environment at this moment in time. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think that's going to become more and more important for any decisions that carry that clinical or that regulatory risk that you mentioned, Karen.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, translation for certain domains and certain types of contents would be considered a low risk use case according to the EU AI Act. And as soon as that translation is related to something affecting life and limb, something affecting a patient in a healthcare setting, it's not. So in my world, we are not low risk. We're not talking about low risk AI translation. We are already, from the EU standpoint, um, getting up there. And we know that around the world, AI laws and governance it's all evolving, right? We're still in the early days of it, of how legislation is really turning out, aren't we? Things are being implemented. Colorado had a first, and I live in Colorado for our listeners who don't know that. We have a first in the nation AI law that has just gone into effect, I think. But yes, anyway, let me think. What else did I want to ask you about or say?
Well, can
Oh,
I?
one thing yeah,
I was going to
go
say,
ahead.
can I just add something to what you're saying there? Because I think you raise an interesting point. The regulations are changing, the models are changing, the use cases are changing, but a human in the loop requirement seems to be front and foremost, bringing
Yeah.
that expertise in. And I wanted to ask you, if I can, about from your perspective, working with companies in this space, what does that actually mean, though, when you talk about
Mhm.
a regulated localization workflow in life
Yeah.
sciences and having
Yeah.
humans in there? Maybe we should unpack that
Yes.
because I think it's not the
Yes.
same as other industries.
You're right. Yes. So, in a practical sense, for anyone who needs one of those precious translation certificates to go along that makes them audit ready when the regulator comes in, it means four eyes. So we're not even talking about one human in the loop. We may use an automated solution, neural machine translation or something to give a draft, but you need to have a qualified expert linguist who edits that content, and you need to have a second pair of eyes somewhere. So it could be a DTP, a sign off, a linguistic sign off step, someone who's looking at the content in context before delivery. Four eyes. The translation standards call for four eyes to get that precious certificate of translation. So you're not even talking about one human in the loop in this world, right? So people think, oh, we can get away with that. Surely not. No, there are ISO standards that we are following. We're talking about being audit ready here. So all that content that I had said, let's set that aside for now as a bad use case for AI. That's what we're talking about. So yes, we can use neural machine translation, which of course is a form of AI in itself, but it must be followed by two humans in that loop. Yeah. So yeah, I just had a new request in yesterday. We have this draft translation. You've been referred to us by such
Hmm.
and such, our lovely,
Yeah.
friendly such and such. I've got this. What does it take for you to turn that into something where I can have a certificate? So I all the time. And well, here's what it takes. This is the workflow that we take whatever you gave us.
Mm.
This is the workflow that it takes. So companies are coming up against it. Sometimes this was a smaller life sciences company that's going into its first clinical trial and first needing translations. So they don't know how it works. They just know they have to have something in another language or seven quickly, and they don't know what it takes, and they're learning. So we help those smaller companies, exciting new technologies. just coming into the market, the ones we can all get very passionate about, as well as the larger companies with established localization programs and significant annual spends trying to shave 5% off here or 10% off there.
Mm.
So we're helping from the localization newcomers, if you like, all the way up to those enterprise established buyers. But
And
that's what it looks
yeah,
like.
I suppose that, and you'll forgive me with my CMO hat on, my marketing hat on across the Vistatec brands for a moment, but one area that I work a lot in is partnerships in industry and, partnering with companies. And it to me, it just seems so obvious. Maybe I'm looking at it too simplistically, but partnering with the right company that understands all the nuances here to me seems like the winning formula because this isn't something you want to get wrong, right? So you
That's
must
right.
find that, Karen, right? In terms of partnership, in
Yeah.
terms of who you
Yeah.
work with, is that is as important as anything else in this scenario, isn't it?
I'm a big proponent of know, like, and trust. I like to trust the people I'm working with, and
Right, right,
I'm happy to work for a company where the people who are buying from us trust us.
yeah.
We're we're trustable. Is that even a word? I suppose I might be making up a neologism there. Yeah, it's
And do you think the
um,
frameworks, do you think the regulators will adapt more to AI, or do you think AI, just bottom line, it needs to conform much more strictly to the existing systems that are in place? Because changing regulations, it's not straightforward in this world. And I'm just wondering how are we seeing changes to regulations because of AI adoption in healthcare, in life sciences, or do we think that the AI providers will get more niche, the models will get more small and nimble and agile for specific use cases, or is it going to be a bit of both, Karen?
so I think both.
Mm,
The only example I can think of the first right now is that the FDA is using AI in various workflows. They have a tool called ELSA, which our listeners will probably be familiar with. But the FDA is certainly using AI to aid in work in productivity, in workflow, and review, and all that sort of thing. So are some I think so there's both. Surely there are going to be providers who niche down, right, and get really good at something very specific. And like I said before, I don't think that will happen first with life sciences. I think it will happen first with the lower risk scenarios where it's only risk to brand, let's say, not risk to life and limb and brand, right? um, but I think regulators will move eventually. As we know, they move in a monolithic, like an iceberg, or whichever idiom you want to use. They're
well, technology
uh,
always moves faster, right?
of
Regulations always
course,
catch up at some
they
stage.
always do.
Yeah,
Right. And
yeah.
the EU's trying, and the U, the major global markets, everyone's trying to help protect its citizens and to come up with AI governance models. We know that AI governance is a big it it it, it's a big elephant, right? People think about using whatever it is, Claude or Copilot or ChatGPT, but it's like what is our AI governance strategy exactly? Can you use it is one thing. What should we be doing it for? Why are we using this? Have we taken a big step back and a deep breath and thought about what we should be doing? You know these questions. You have these conversations all the time.
Yeah, I do. And I think for me, obviously in my world, it comes back an awful lot to multilingual communications because ultimately, like there are lots of use cases where AI is improving patient access, it's improving patient outcomes. There are lots of nuances that I think we've touched on a lot here. But the personalization and the multilingual aspect of things when it comes to communication here, both from whether it's marketing communications, whether it's, I mean, everything from use cases, information for doctors, information for patients, whether it's product information. I mean, the whole gambit. And I don't just mean written word here. I'm talking audio, video,
Yeah.
and the written word across multiple languages and across multiple cultures. I think AI can play a role here, but at the moment, I think it's very much in a hybrid environment because of all of the different nuances that that raises. I mean, the complexity of it, unless you're working with somebody that knows what they're doing in all of those different content types across those different languages and across those different cultures, mixed with the legal requirement and the regulatory requirements that which are not the same, depending
Yeah.
on where you are, depending on what you're doing, whether that's bringing a new drug to market or looking after patients or running a clinical trial, or trying to sell your latest solution, different type of content. Um, all of those nuances, you just need somebody that understands all of that, that does that in an international scale, um, but do it in a manner that's aligned with everything that needs to be done. And I suppose it comes to me back to the essence of what true effective multilingual communication is, which I think it's reaching the intended audience effectively, resonating with the intended audience, so action occurs, but also doing that in a safe, regulated, efficient environment. Yes, you can reduce costs along the way. Yes, you can improve speed and time and efficiencies, but all of that falls flat if it's not actually having a meaningful engagement at the end. If that content is not actually creating action and activity or helping somebody to understand something or helping a better outcome achieve. I think it is a multi-layered scenario, and I mean it's very privileged to sit where I sit and be able to see this across some of the world's leading sort of life sciences companies that we work with. But it is not simple, and I think the work that you do and that the team does across Vistatec Life Science, it is mind blowing. And for anybody that needs to find out more, they should certainly get in touch with you, because the expertise that's brought to the table here. I know I sound like I'm selling this, but genuinely the expertise that is brought to the table by you and your colleagues, I think is second to none. And I think that's often the difference between getting something right and having to go back and revisit it time and time again, which in life sciences gets very costly and very dangerous very quickly. And that's a risk I don't think we can take in life sciences. Sorry for the soapbox moment, Karen, but that's how I felt about it.
Hey, I am going to, I think we're going to end on that soapbox
Okay.
moment. I think
All
we're
right.
going to say that was a lovely way to conclude our conversation, Simon. And I hope that our audience, has enjoyed these thoughts. I get to talk about this kind of thing. Like I said, I wasn't kidding when I said I get asked this question all the time. How is AI affecting your business? Where is it? Is it, can you not? Tell me more, Karen. I get asked this all the time. So I'm always happy to talk about it. And I'm thankful to have had you as our guest this month like I said, mix things up a bit.
Well,
So, to our audience, this Life Sciences in Focus podcast is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other leading platforms, as well as on YouTube if you want to watch us. Please make sure